Hi, it's Carol Salter here reading from her book. We're on chapter 33 this time. Last chapter we left Gristle arriving in Ramsgate and moving into Westwood Cross, and also Hearty Onk getting back together again. Let's see what happens today. Chapter 33, The West Wood. The group of 4 friends arrived at the area known as the West Wood just after dusk. The small strip of ancient woodland was enclosed by fencing for most of its circumference. A low flint wall followed the boundary on one side, culminating in an impressive gateway. They stood, or fluttered, staring in through the padlocked wrought iron gates. A skilful blacksmith had fashioned lettering, West on the left gate and Wood on the right, so they flowed within the design. Securing the gate hinges on either side were tall concrete and flint pillars. More words, Westwood Lodge, were chiselled into the facing, along with artistic Celtic designs whose meaning was long forgotten. Westwood Lodge was the latest in a long line of homes sited inside the ancient Westwood. Today it contained a small business providing bespoke, purpose-built cremation services for domestic animals. It promised a better, more sympathetic way for people who wanted a dignified service for their beloved pet in their bereavement. The owners, pet lovers themselves, had established the very personal, responsive service following unhappiness at their own cherished pet's demise, according to their leaflet. It was a far better send-off than anything Gristle was planning to do with her colony of newly created bunnies over at the nearby cross. "It's a bit spooky, isn't it?" asked Hearty, awed by the humongous gates. He stared like a timid mouse through the railings at the path beyond, which disappeared into the distance. "Well, yes, I know it looks spooky," answered Shine, trying hard not to look through the railings. "But my friend Spotty Minnie Bannister says—" "This isn't another giant slug, is it?" Hearty interrupted. "No," responded Shine, "it's not. And for your information, Cecil is a very kind and caring slug." "Oh, that's okay then," replied Hearty, not reassured by Shine's reply. The last remaining fragment of the West Wood ran down the left side of Poor Hole Lane. The lane was ancient and derived its name from medieval times. Penniless folk who died of the plague and other sundry diseases were buried en masse in the nearby chalk hole. The steady stream of paupers dying was enough to keep the grave open on a permanent basis. Local historians believe the site was also used to bury pox-ridden sailors who died while their ships were docked at Ramsgate Port. Their funeral expenses, paid promptly by their captains not wanting to ship a decomposing body home, supplemented the parish coffers. "Well," he continued, after another lengthy pause while he scanned the inside of the property. Hearty could feel the atmosphere charged with long-lost dead souls. No wonder people stayed away from it. He would too if they had another option. "Well, what?" asked Shine, choosing not to acknowledge Hearty's sarcasm, and adding some of her own to her spiky reply. "Well, who is Spotty Mandy Blownester when he's at home? If I'm risking my life, I want to know who this person is at the very least." There was a slight pause. Then Shine answered. "It's Spotty Minnie Bannister, and you're not risking your life going into the West Wood. We're trying to keep Onk safe, remember?" Shine answered, her eyes stinging as she tried to rein in her emotions. And? Asked Hearty again. And? Answered Shine, remaining obtuse. And I still don't know who Spotty Whatsit is, Hearty replied, starting to feel he was getting the proverbial runaround. Shine stammered her reply. He's, a yellow woolly teddy bear, if you must know. She rushed on before Hearty could inhale. He's a great friend, one I would entrust with my life, and he lives in Manston. Shine ended her explanation in a gush, glaring at Hearty and daring him to contradict her. Oh, said Hearty. Oh, said Onk, echoing Hearty's sentiments. There really wasn't anything to say after that. Onk broke the rusted padlock with 2 fingers of one hand, and the company of heroes entered the wood. Inside the gates, the small wooded path struck off like an arrow straight into the distance, seemingly for miles. The 4 fellows stepped onto the indented path, Hearty feeling not unlike Dorothy in The Wizard of Oz. Hearty had read too many human classics. The scenery was nothing like Oz, or even Kansas for that matter. There were trees of every size, colour and description. Autumn was in full swing. Shorter trees lined both sides of the path. Larger trees waved ahead on the horizon as if beckoning them in. Behind them stood the open iron gates they had walked through. As they watched this reassuring sight, the gates swung shut of their own accord. The padlock lying on the ground, broken by Onk's gigantic fingers, lifted itself off the trampled grass into the air and hovered there. The hanging rusted chain wove itself through the right-hand gate and with alarming dexterity threaded through the padlock, which clanged shut, falling lifeless once more around the vertical bars. Hearty, Shine, Dog, and Onk each looked at one another and shrugged. They weren't that worried. 3 of them could fly, and they had Onk as a protector if things got difficult. He didn't seem worried in the slightest, only amused by the magic act, which he applauded. As no other plan presented itself, they followed the path. Despite the trail being ramrod straight, when Hearty looked behind a couple of minutes later, the gates had vanished. There was nothing but a vista of trees. At this precise moment, Shine noticed something else amiss. She dropped back to fly alongside Hearty and have her suspicions confirmed. Hearty, Hearty, she whispered. He glanced at her. Why are you whispering? He asked, half his thoughts focused on where the gates had gone. Huh? She said, her mind also preoccupied. I don't know, she answered. Admittedly, the quiet voice wasn't like her. It just seems like the right thing to do somehow, she replied, her tone remaining hushed. Oh, replied Hearty, bemused. Have you noticed anything odd? She asked him. Yes, the gates have gone, he answered. Have they? She squealed, spinning round in fright to look. They have! They've gone! Oh, my goodness, she moaned. It's okay, reassured Hearty. Onk's all right, so it'll be fine. Will it? She asked, concern etched on her pretty face. I guess so, mused Hearty, surprised by her nervousness and amazed at his own calmness. Well, the gates aren't the only thing that's strange, she continued. Have you watched the trees? The trees? What about the trees? Hearty said, starting to examine the trees nearest him. They're bowing. Bowing? Yes, bowing. And that's not all, answered Shine, trying hard to keep the smugness out of her voice. They're bowing to Onk. You're joking, said Hearty, scoffing at the ridiculous idea. No, I'm not. Look! Hearty looked. There was Dog gambling ahead as usual. There was Onk tramping along in Dog's wake in the exact centre of the path, his huge paddle-like feet leaving dinosaur impressions in the soft loamy soil. And, great galloping gorgons, there were the trees, bowing. As Onk stepped level with a tree, each individual tree performed a neat, slow bow. Hearty watched the trees as he and Shine passed by. Nothing. They're bowing to Onk, he muttered, dumbfounded. Yes, I know. I told you, remember? Shine commented, the sarcasm heavy in her voice once more. They were about to approach Onk to see if he'd noticed the tree phenomenon when the scenery altered and the path stopped at the edge of a huge circle of bright green grass. In front of them, at the exact centre of the grass, was a large Victorian house. The three of them gazed at it in intrepidation, while Dog laid down on the edge of the grass, placing his head on his paws. A wisp of smoke rose from his nostrils, a sign of things to come. Following this short respite, Dog became a very bad dog indeed. Every time any of them attempted to cross the bright circle of grass towards the house, together or individually, Dog attacked them. He bit Onk's ankles till they bled and tried to flame Hearty and Shine when they flew too close, almost singeing their wingtips. They were standing in front of an enchanted castle, which they couldn't see and didn't know existed. But Dog, being a dragon who travelled between the light dimensions, knew. Dog is being a downright pain, Hearty moaned. Onk nodded, rubbing his sore heels. I think we should stop trying to gain access to the house tonight and try again in the morning. Maybe Dog will have calmed down by then, he added, looking at Onk and Shine for confirmation. That's a good idea, agreed Shine. I'm tired despite the early hour. Let's rest for the night in those oak trees. Hearty hadn't noticed the oaks until now. Despite being fairy folk, Onk, Shine and Hearty couldn't see, hear or touch the castle because of its enchantment. They could see the current property, Westwood Lodge, which stood on the site for over 100 years. Dog could see both the castle and the lodge, but he was unable to explain this to his friends. They found themselves skirting around an apparently normal house. Between it and them grew a piece of verdant green grass, where Dog watched them like a hawk, eager to jump if they erred too close to the object of his attention. None of them were sure whether Dog was concerned for them or attracted by the house. High above the friends, in the ancient oaks, circling the green, a parliament of rooks peered down on the trio of fairy folk. To their simple minds, the Westwood Rookery, their ancestral home and a local sky mark for the past 100 years, was under threat. 2 of their number were dispatched to monitor these intruders, whilst the remainder of the colony decided to find a safer retreat for the night on the nearby shopping centre roofs. The rooks, keen followers of magic, guessed something suspicious was afoot below them, and there was no way they wanted to be caught in the middle of it. Onk leaned against an ancient oak tree facing the grass circle. He was puzzled by Dog's behaviour. Try as he might, he couldn't persuade Dog to let him step on the grass. He had blood running in rivulets down his ankles to show for it. Onk never stayed frustrated for long, and today was no exception. He was sure things would sort themselves out. In his experience they always did, and he had patience aplenty. For some unknown reason, Onk felt relaxed and content right here in this precise spot. He smiled and sighed and imagined he felt the ground beneath him sigh too. It felt like a bunching up and releasing of troll power. Onk inhaled and scented something, something indefinable yet wonderful and hypnotic. Within minutes, his head filled with wonder and happiness, he fell into an untroubled sleep. I wish Onk's snores weren't so loud. It's hard trying to sleep near him, muttered Shine, nestling a few feet away on a bouncy dock leaf. You think you've got problems. You want to try sleeping in the tree he's leaning against. The vibration goes right to the end of my wings, Hearty complained. Shine tittered in the darkening gloom. Well, why don't you come over to my leaf? Shine suggested, her tone a bit flirty. I can't, Hearty replied. He couldn't tell her he'd already thought about joining her until he noticed the sickly tree behind him. This tree needs me. It's got loads of health problems. It needs me to fix them. I can't imagine how it survived this long without healing. Have you seen the state of its upper branches? Shine glanced up. In the fading light, she could see an insipid yellow fungus had spawned on the upper levels. It had destroyed the leaves as they budded the previous spring, causing this year's growth to be deformed and alien. She shuddered. Onk likes it here, she said, changing the subject. Yes, he seems very happy, doesn't he? Answered Hearty, looking down at Onk, who was sound asleep with a smile on his face. Said Shine, as she too was drifting off into slumber. Very happy, very relaxed and safe. It was the last word Shine uttered. She left Hearty alone and awake, listening to the mutterings of the rooks high above. There's something special about this place, Hearty said to himself. I can't put my finger on it, but I know, and Dog knows too. He looked down at Dog, stretched out full length on the grass like a sleeping sentry on guard duty. Dog lay between them and the large vacant swathe of grass that had become his personal territory for some reason. He watched Dog twitching and jumping in his sleep. What would happen if I floated across over the top while Dog slept, he wondered. After considering the probabilities for a few minutes, he decided not to test out his theory. He didn't fancy being frazzled to a crisp by a dragon, no matter how young it was. Let sleeping dogs, or Dog, lie, he thought. Hearty settled back into the bole of the oak, sharing his life force and healing his newfound friend. He'd figure that problem out tomorrow, he decided. Meanwhile, not a quarter of a mile away from where Onk and his friends were settling down for the night, Gristle was settling down too, in a very comfortable spot. You know, she mused, talking to herself, a habit employed by lonely folk everywhere, I might just move in here, or maybe it would suffice as a weekend holiday home. The rabbit here is particularly tasty, more gamey and flavoursome than those in Hampstead Heath. Gristle snuggled further down into the luxury duck-feather sleeping bag, hanging vertically 10 feet above the ground on a display wall. She didn't realise it was on the wall for display purposes only. Yes, a holiday home, she continued. I'll have to do something about these sleeping arrangements. I don't think I could sleep up the side of a wall permanently. As Gristle rested in her temporary home, her bed hanging perpendicular to the floor, she thought back to what Gru the Gruesome had told her yesterday about shadow watching. Despite appearing ignorant and behaving obtuse, she had taken in much of the theoretical meanderings Gru had imparted. Gristle didn't get where she was by being fully stupid. I fancy the idea of capturing the minds of birds and animals to do my bidding. Their bodies dying after I've used them isn't a worry, though it is a waste of resources and effort on my part. Still, I'm doing my part for the environment in my own way. I recycle people into rabbits for food, after all. The thought that shadow watching might take years to learn, as Gru implied, annoyed Gristle no end. I bet Gru was laying it on, pretending it was difficult, making her role indispensable. Soon showed her indispensable my left foot. Gristle giggled in that unnatural young girl's tone she had. She laughed louder when she remembered Gru didn't have a left foot anymore. Well, not one that I would recognise, more of a claw, really. She giggled again. I wonder if I could borrow a mind without destroying the body. To be able to reuse the host has many advantages. Maybe Gru just wore them out. Maybe she took more from them than they had the energy to give. That's the sort of thing the daft old bat would do. She wasn't very bright. Look how easily I turned her into a toad. I would have seen that coming a mile off. If I don't take every ounce of energy, perhaps the victim will survive in a usable condition, or at least a bit longer. Whilst Gristle relished in her destruction of Gru and contemplated the notion of shadow watching, 2 rooks from the westward landed on the roof above her sleeping bag. Without a second thought, Gristle tried out her plan. She reached out mentally and seized one of the bird's minds. She grasped its fragile intellect with all the sophistication and finesse of an ogre wielding a 2-ton sledgehammer to open a packet of crisps. Her hypothesis was incorrect and fatal. It was in fact the initial capturing of the mind that ordained the creature's demise, not its use or its subsequent release. Instantly, Gristle could understand what the rook's companion was wittering on about. Here, in the West Wood, our ancestral home, the bloomin' liberty, squawked Ernie, the larger of the 2 rooks. Answered Sidney, the smaller one, his response incoherent. What are they here for? That's what I want to know. Settled under our very oaks without a please or a thank you. Great big lump of a troll making dents in our trees. Up to no good, I'll bet. Trouble be here before tomorrow's out, you mark my words. They eat anything, you know, alive or dead. Gives me the shivers. It was then Ernie noticed his companion wasn't looking too well. You're right, Sidney, only you look kind of pasty. Almost on cue with Ernie's last word, Sidney, Ernie's 3rd cousin twice removed, keeled over, falling stone dead to the ground far below. Ernie panicked over the sudden death of Sidney, his friend and cousin, watching agog as his body plummeted to the ground and blossomed into a mess of black feathers on the distant concrete. Leaping high into the air, the rook flew away, cawing in abject terror. It appeared trouble wasn't bothering to wait for tomorrow to arrive. Below, snuggled up in her sleeping bag, Gristle gave a malevolent smile that was so wicked, so laced with evil intent, several mice downstairs in the basement fainted away. Outside the shop, plants withered, and a young robin's heart stopped beating, freezing him onto one of the benches facing the car park. Shadow watching had definite possibilities, Gristle decided. So what if the poor things can't cope with such a powerful mind like mine? Their death is for my greater good. Tomorrow, is going to be a fabulously delicious day, she decided, falling asleep in her arboreal cocoon of feathers. And that's where we're going to leave it today. Look forward to seeing you next time. Goodbye.